right, so Plato. I was going to do this in my basement, hopefully for obvious reasons, but did choose to do it inside instead of outside. So not quite dungeon-like, not quite cave-like. Later in the course, I'll probably do some from my basement. But anyway, so I want to get back to Plato. Now that your exams are done, hopefully you've had a chance to do the reading. Again, some of you may have read it before, some of you may not have read it before. Hopefully you read it through a couple of times, and it may have seemed somewhat repetitive. That's on purpose, and I'll talk about why. So let's start with the divided line. And remember, all of this, Dr. Schrappe at least thinks, ties back to the paragraph I ended with on page 71 last time. The soul is like the eye, when resting upon that on which truth and being shine. The soul perceives and understands, and is radiant with intelligence. But when turned toward the twilight of becoming and perishing, then she has opinion only, and goes blinking about, and is first of one opinion, then of another, and seems to have no intelligence. So I have fairly young kids. Well, a couple of them aren't so young anymore. They once were young. If you've been around young children, this is going to sound mean. That does not mean it's untrue. If you've been around a group of young children, like when you go to pick a child up from elementary school or something, are there not some kids, even at an early age, who just seem a bit different? They seem to radiate a type of intelligence, not necessarily book smarts, but they carry themselves a bit differently, they act a bit differently, perhaps it's a maturity thing, who knows, but there's something about them that's different. Like, whoa, that person might actually, be going somewhere, right? Other kids may just kind of flounder through life, right? That they'll do this thing for a while, then this thing for a while, this thing for a while, this thing for a while. And that's not to say that that's a bad life. That's not to say that they're stupid. That's not to say that they don't have any talent. That's not to say anything along those lines. I'm really trying to articulate what Plato is talking about here. Not just children, but adults, right? There are some friends, I imagine you have friends, whom you do not go to for advice because they're always changing their mind about everything. Now, I'm not saying changing their mind about something based on new information, right? Trying to gain intelligence, trying to learn, trying to be more knowledgeable. I'm talking about one day they think one thing, the next day they think something else, the next day they think something else, and there's really no rhyme nor reason for these changes. They just change just to change, okay? That would be like the person who has opinion only. That's what they're changing. They're changing their personal preferences. They're not getting closer to truth. They're not gaining in knowledge. They're not acquiring more justification, which then leads to their change in belief. They're just changing beliefs just to change, right? They go blinking about. Here, then here, then here, then here, then here. Now, what's interesting with this imagery is that lights that blink are occasionally on. So if we're using the light-dark motif, and light is on, right? Light is intelligence, light is knowledge, and darkness is lack of intelligence, opinion only, something along those lines, then even the blinkers occasionally are correct. Occasionally the thing that they hold as opinion actually is true, objectively speaking. They just don't know it because they're just blinking, right? I mean, if you go to a buffet and you have a little bit of everything, you're going to happen on to whatever the really good thing at the buffet is, right? You're just going to happen on to it. Blinkers happen on to truth occasionally, but they don't recognize it when they have it because they're going to change. Those are the friends you don't go to for advice. They don't really have any good advice to give you. You go to your knowledgeable friends, you go to your intelligent friends, you go to your friends who have had certain experiences, and we'll talk about the role of experience here. Even though we're talking about soul talk, there's still an aspect of experience that's necessary here. Right? You go to your friends who, again, to quote Plato here in this paragraph on 71, radiate a certain type of intelligence. Right? There are people that you're drawn to at parties, at social functions, because they radiate something. Right? These are the lives of the party and so forth. They're radiating something, a self-confidence, a knowledge. Who knows? But it's something that you probably can't even articulate, and we'll get to the limits of articulation when we talk about Plato here as well. But you're drawn to them. Just like bugs are drawn to light, right? You get moths and ladybugs and stink bugs and all these other things in your house. Why? Because you have lights on. And so they come in. They're drawn toward the light. Now, obviously, there are some bugs which do not like the light. They prefer the darkness, cockroaches or something along those lines. But for the most part, even things like moths that fly around at night are still drawn to light. That's why the bug zapper things work, because they emit light. Light, dark. And remember, it's the soul that perceives and understands. Okay. So let's go to the divided line. The divided line is the first attempt, really, at explaining the allegory of the cave. The divided line is very mathematical. We've got lines that are halved, and then those lines are halved, and so on and so forth. Cottingham gives us a nice little chart over on the left-hand side at the bottom of page 72, which was the beginnings of this chart. Okay, I've just fleshed it out a bit more. All right? So we have this kind of massive line cutting the thing in half. Right? And below that line, this is kind of a chasm. Right? This is a line that's different. This is a line of demarcation, a line of separation between, as Plato says, two different realms. So below the line, then, we have the visible realm, the world of appearances. And remember, Plato, there's a distinction between appearance and reality, right? And he already told us at the bottom of page 69, he's going to be on the side of Parmenides, stability, oneness, so on and so forth. That's reality. Change and stuff, that's appearance. So all this stuff down here in the visible realm, what do we see around us? Things like change, motion, differentness, so on and so forth. Things down here then are based on particulars. Particular things, particular boards, particular books, particular computers, particular ties, particular, and based on the particular person having the particular experience of the particular thing at the particular time. Notice those particulars can never be recreated. Like we talked about with Heraclitus, you can't step in the same river twice because there's not a same you, let alone a same river. Particulars. These particulars then are always going to be changing, which again is the world of appearance, not reality for Plato. So in this visible realm we also have change. We also necessarily have subjectivity rather than objectivity because it's subject to me, particular to this subject right here. My own subjective, not truths necessarily, though we may use that word, subjective truths, which again are potentially changing. But Plato says, here's opinion down here. This isn't knowledge. This is opinion, which again is going to go blinking about. Changing, right? Each particular subject. Appearance, truths. So where he starts then is the world of the senses. Imagery, images. Representational art, for instance. We'll see truth is way up here. So images, shadows, representational art are way down here. They are cheap forms of truth, if they're even truth at all. We'll talk more about that when we turn the allegory of the cave, which may make a bit more sense to many of you. Images, representations, right? These are, again, particulars. So this particular tie, it's just an image, it's a picture, it's a particular thing, which may evoke then certain ideas about purple or about stripedness or about fellows who wear ties. Who knows? There's going to be a whole lot of other stuff attached to your particular experience of this particular tie at this particular point in time. That's all you. That has nothing to do with this tie. That's about you, the subject who's having the experience of this tie. So again, go back to the ice cream thing. Down here, I like chocolate ice cream. Whoop-de-doo. You know what I like even better, though? Peach ice cream. So last night, my wife and I went to the ice cream shop. The ice cream shop, because it's 1952. But anyway, so we went out for ice cream, just her and I. And on the way there, I thought, man, I'm going to get the chocolate chip, right? The chocolate ice cream with the chocolate chips inside. And strawberry. Like those two go so well together. It's going to be delicious. That's what I'm in the mood for. I know I like it. It's going to be awesome. Then when we get there, then I realize, whoa, hold on. It's peach ice cream season. Scratch the double chocolate chip. Scratch the strawberry. We got to go in for the peach. I changed my mind. Like that. As soon as I realized peach was an option, I'm in for peach. I had the peach with the banana chocolate chip, by the way. Both delicious. Anyway, so you can probably tell where I went. We had a gift card. So, right, my opinion changed quickly. Right, there was no objective truth here. I'm not telling you objectively peach ice cream is better than any of the other alternatives. In my opinion, it's better. I prefer it, but all of that's about particulars and it's about subjectivity. Now these images here, because remember this is sort of epistemology, knowledge, justify true belief. But at the same time it's also metaphysics, appearance, reality, so on and so forth. And so what Plato is doing here is he's really trying to tie this to our actual experiences of the world. So forget about particular ties. He wants to go even more basic, more primordial, more fundamental than an experience of a particular tie. Initially, and this is tough to get back to because we're so far removed from it now, but this is early childhood development stuff, like just out of the womb type of childhood development, right? You're being bombarded constantly with new stuff, right? Your senses are on overload, which is why newborns have to sleep so much in order for their brains to process everything that's being thrown at them. Sights, sounds, sensations. It would be awesome if I could do the other two as S's, right? Sight, sound, sensation, smell. Oh, I can't do taste as an S. Oh well, anyway. That would have been easier for me to remember if they were all 5 S's. Anyway. You're being bombarded all of the time. And you don't yet have the intellectual, conceptual framework to completely make sense of all of it. It's just, whoa. Right? So you don't even have names for things like purple. You're just like, experience of a thing. That's it. That's where this is. That's the most basic, most primordial, most fundamental level of experience. That's what this is experience. And so notice your mind really hasn't done much yet. Instead, you're just receiving sensory input. That's it. It's sensory input overload. This is the senses only. That's why he talks about images. This is representational. This isn't the actual thing. This is a representation of the thing. But eventually, somehow, these amazing things, Plato didn't know how it works exactly. Nobody would talk about knows exactly how it's going to work. And guess what? Nobody even writing or thinking today, 2020, well, I shouldn't have dated it, so in case somebody watches this later. Anyway, nobody today knows exactly how this thing works either. Language acquisition is a thing that linguists still haven't completely figured out, which is why it's so difficult, especially later in life, once this thing has started to codify a bit and harden, which is why it's so difficult to learn a second language or a third language or a fourth language unless you're being exposed to it all of the time early in your life, when you can't really distinguish, oh, this is this language, right? Oh, this is Swahili, this is Kinyamulenge, right? Oh, this is English, this is Portuguese. No, you're just hearing words. And your mind will kind of make sense of it somehow later. You're just being thrown images, and your mind will eventually later on get things like purple, white, black. What other colors do I have here? Brown. Or maybe it's tan, maybe it's beige. I don't know. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. So you're just getting input in this first stage. The second stage then, and remember, this is still the visible realm. This is still the world of appearances. This is still particulars. This is still subjectivity. The second level then, what Plato calls ordinary objects. Because what's happening now is your mind is beginning to conceptualize. Your mind is beginning to abstract out of experiences and beginning to assign names to things. Names to things then allow you to experience it as something, right? So this isn't just experience. This is, purple. Purple tie, right? You have names, you can call it a thing. And so you can experience this not just as, but as a purple tie. And again, this is very, very difficult for us to really wrap our heads around because we've been doing this for so long, right? When we walk into a room, we already know the things in the room. We're not being bombarded with unnameable things, unnameable objects, stuff that we don't know what to do with. Like, oh wow, there's a thing on a pedestal. Oh, let me grab one of these. Here. Hey, gee, it's a Well, I wonder what you do with Well, given how it's constructed, even if I'm not a musician, I can kind of presume that I could place things upon it, like books, or any number of other things, or computers, or phones. This is a ledge. This is something to place other things upon. And that's very much like other things that I know that I can place other things upon. Perhaps this is somewhat table-like, or shelf-like. I've got a name for it. A name for the thing allows me to connect it with other experiences of similar things, and allows me then to experience it as a shelf, or as a table, or as a music stand, not just random thing. That's the ordinary objects he's talking about here. Our mind allows us to experience the world as usable objects. Something very Heideggerian there, right? Equipment and so forth that we talked about before. But even there, that's still very particular. That's particular to that type of stand. It's particular to my experiences of those types of things. But at least the mind now has come on the scene. This is our mind plus the sensory stuff that we're being bombarded with. Our mind is doing some work now, so it's mind plus senses. So we're better, we're closer to truth. But we're still not there yet because it's still based on particulars and subjectivity and the world of appearance. And so you may be asking yourself, well, Dr. Schrappe / Plato, I'm speaking on behalf of Plato today. Plato, what the heck is out there that we experience that isn't tied to particulars? What the heck is out there that we don't experience through the world of the senses? Plato would say, I'm so glad you asked. The answer is mathematical objects. triangles, for instance. You know what I don't need to do? I don't need to draw a triangle on this board right here. Because you all know exactly what triangles look like. You all know exactly the properties of every single triangle ever. It has nothing to do with your particular experiences of particular triangles. It has nothing to do with this particular time, historically speaking. Every triangle ever, speaking again on behalf of Plato, this is an objective truth, unchanging, about triangles that we can all therefore know because it is a truth. We've seen justification for it in school. We therefore have good reason to believe all triangles ever have 3 sides and 3 angles. Thus the name triangle. And we know even more about triangles. We know every triangle ever and every triangle henceforth, these 3 angles will add up to 180 degrees. That's part of the definition of a triangle. I don't need to draw a picture. You don't need to think about a particular triangle. Allow me to think about a particular triangle. No. It's more conceptual than that. It's more abstract than that. This stuff here is concrete. This stuff here is abstract. I'm talking about the concept of triangle. You use that concept to determine then which particular things are triangles and which particular things are not. But you're using the concept. You're using your mind only, not the senses. We've now crossed this chasm. We've now crossed over into objective truth, into the intelligible realm where knowledge is. This isn't knowledge, this is opinion. This is the blinkers. This is the radiant with intelligent folks. Oh, wow, you speak so eloquently about triangles and their triangleness, and their angles and sides, right? I remember geometry proofs, right? I don't know if you guys have had geometry. I hope you have. Actually, I wish that you wouldn't have to. I didn't like geometry because you had to go through the step-by-step process, the justification, for proving that these 2 triangles are congruent. Side angle, side angle, and all that. Come on, man. We all know they're congruent. You just know, don't you? Can't you just look at the thing? Yes, these are congruent triangles. Or look at the thing. No, these things ain't congruent. You just know. Nope, you got to go through the proof. You got to show me the evidence, the justification. Give me the argument in support of the truth claim that these are congruent triangles. I don't know if I've said this before or not. I should be clear here. When I'm talking about knowledge as justified true belief, there are certain aspects of that we have no control over. We don't have control over whether triangles, angles add up to 180 or not, or whether they have 3 of them. That's just an objective truth beyond us. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of Plato here. That's truth. We have nothing to do with that. Neither is true or it's not. Metaphysical claims, epistemological claims. Belief is something only I have control over. I can't give you a belief. I can't force you to believe something. Either you do or you don't. And maybe that's a rational choice. Maybe it's not. We'll talk about that toward the end of the course. The only thing I can give you, the only thing any teacher can ever give you, and the only thing any teacher has ever given you is justification. Your math teachers throughout school just gave you tons and tons of examples to demonstrate the truth of something. It wasn't their truth, it wasn't your truth. It wasn't that they were giving you belief. What they were giving you was the argument in support of. They were giving you evidence for, like we talked about briefly, and we'll get back to that probably next week or week after, in 2 weeks probably. Very briefly, logic, a list of premises followed by a conclusion. The exams then and examinations are chances for you to prove what you know, to prove what you've learned, right? So like the times table things that are tested and so forth, right? If you know it, then you can recall it quickly. I didn't need to ask Google before starting rambling. How many angles do triangles have? How many sides do triangles have? What are the angles add up to in a triangle? Because I know it. It's right here. Boom. Got it. Mathematical objects. And math is going to be one of these weird things that's going to keep coming up in this Intro to Philosophy class. In the history of Western philosophy, mathematics has this very unique, special place. And it's because it's so abstract, so objectively true, that it makes an interesting case study. If we're trying to get at knowledge, this might be an interesting way of going about it, analyzing mathematics. So Intro to Philosophy, at least the next few weeks, may actually be Introduction to Philosophy of Mathematics in a really weird way. Notice that these are not particulars, these are universals. Every triangle, every square, every rectangle, every circle, every. And conversely then, none, right? There are no triangles that have 16 sides, because that's not a triangle. These are universal. These are permanent. They're not changing. There's consistency here. That's how it can be true, and that's how we can have knowledge about it. You can step in the same river twice. There's a same you, there's consistency there in reality, and there's consistency to the river as well. Even if all of the water droplets are different, there's still something about that's the same. Persistence through time, which I believe is the title of Dali's painting with the melting clocks. Persistence of memory. Persistence of memory. Anyway, mathematical objects, your mind only at work here. You don't need the senses anymore. You don't need to experience another triangle. You don't actually ever have to see a triangle to learn all about triangles, quite frankly. It helps because the way our minds are wired, we're structured to see particulars and then somehow abstract out of them. But this is the difficult leap, the abstract out of. The understanding the abstraction. That's the tough part. That's why for some folks, philosophy is a difficult subject, because it's abstraction. It's trying to take a step or 3 or 28, a whole heck of a lot of steps back from actual experience to analyze experience. It's objective, you can have knowledge, it's about reality, it's permanent, this is the intelligible realm. But there's one more step here. And Plato is clear in his writings. Everyone can get to this level here. Not that everyone does. Most folks stay stuck down here somewhere. But everyone can make it at least up to here. And so to finish that story, I have to tell you another story about Plato. Plato is an elitist. Okay, fine, whatever. Again, it doesn't mean he's wrong just because he's an elitist. But he is. Again, because he's skeptical of most folks, because most folks are relying upon appearance rather than seeing reality, because remember, most folks had Socrates executed. It all goes back to Socrates for Plato. And so very few folks are ever actually going to see reality the way it actually is. To live in reality, to live in big T truth. Most folks are going to be stuck with their opinions. And they're going to be so stuck that they're going to think that my objective claims are actually subjective claims. They're going to think when I say peach ice cream is the best, that all I'm saying is I really like it. Which is not what I'm saying at all, as I talked about before. Except I think then it was chocolate ice cream. Got peach ice cream in the brain, it's delicious. But especially fruit, like a fruity ice cream paired with like a chocolate. Oh man, chocolate and fruit together, very underrated. I know half hour in, very few of you are still watching, but man, like lemon and chocolate together, oh my goodness, it's delicious. Okay, like the citrus and the, okay, so. The culinary arts, by the way, Dr. Schrappe at least thinks, the most perfect art form. It's the only art that appeals to all 5 senses. The food tastes different when you can hear it being prepared, when you can smell it being prepared. There's a tactile thing, not just as you hold it, but as it enters your mouth. There's tacticity there, sensation there, in addition to taste. right? And everyone knows you eat with your eyes first. I would say not first, but you do eat with your eyes prior to eating with your mouth, unless you're blindfolded or blind or something along those lines, right? If it doesn't look appetizing, as if you have kids or if you've ever been a kid, if it doesn't look appetizing, you don't think it's going to taste appetizing either. Plating is super important, right? It's aesthetic. Anyway, all right, so that's mind only, right? But there's one more step. Everyone can get here. Only a few even have the ability to get to the next level. And of those that have the ability to, very few of them actually will. This next level is purely the soul. Nothing to do with the mind at all. So we've got senses only. Then we have mind plus senses. Then we leave the senses behind and talk only about the mental stuff. Then we leave the mind behind and talk about the soul, because remember, the soul can understand and perceive. The soul. And Plato says that there are really just 4 types of souls. There's the producer. There are people who are just really good at making stuff. Artists, artisans. They're good at making stuff. You know what frequently they're not very good at doing? Selling the stuff they've made. Because their soul is not equipped for it. Thankfully, there are people who are really good at selling things. They don't make stuff, but they can sell the stuff that other people have made. Marketers, salesmen, so on and so forth. That's a second type of soul. So you've got producers, the makers of things, the sellers of things. Then we have caretakers. There are some people, and again, I'm speaking on behalf of Plato, whose soul is well equipped to take care of other people. They make great nurses, elementary school teachers, soldiers. Right? They're guardians. They take care of people, take care of ideas. They can all make it to here. But there's a 4th type of soul that can get to this soul stuff, whose soul is equipped in such a way that they can understand even more abstract concepts. The born philosopher. The thinkers. And as we'll see, the thinkers then, at the end of the allegory of the cave, are the ones who, after this epiphany experience, we're back to the aletheia thing, we're back to revelation again, the soul is enlightened, it's awakened to see reality for the way it actually is, to see these forms that Plato talks about. And then they can't rest there, they have to go back. They have to go back and teach. Now, I'm not saying every teacher is a born philosopher, nor am I saying every born philosopher is a teacher. Plato thinks the two do go together, though. And not just the teachers, but also the leaders of the state. Should be, not are, should be born philosophers who have had the epiphany experience of these forms. The forms are difficult to talk about for a number of reasons. One, super abstract stuff is difficult to talk about. Secondly, it's tough to talk about because by talking about it, I cheapen it, says Plato. That by articulating these concepts, I'm sort of robbing the concepts themselves of something. Let's go back to love again, which I've mentioned before, and we'll probably mention again. Welcome to Intro to Philosophy, it's Intro to Love and Intro to Mathematics. There you go. So, again, attempting to articulate love, there's always going to be something left out. If I could fully explain it, fully describe it, you would wonder, is that actually love then? Not so sure. That language itself is limited. You can't fully articulate an experience. Right? This is the trouble with things like journals and blogs and vlogs and all of that, right? You're attempting to capture an experience using words, or heck, even using pictures. And you can't fully capture it. The difficulty, the trick is to say or photograph just enough to remember, to relive the experience, but not say so much or show so much that you replace the experience. Plato's forms, he's going to talk about three: truth, beauty, and goodness. And again, while you may be able to articulate particular, it's down here, particular instances of beauty, maybe be able to point to it. It's out there, it's a particular thing. That's a beautiful flower. That's a beautiful person. That's a beautiful building. I don't know. It's much tougher to articulate, all right, I agree it's a beautiful building, but just so we're clear, what do you mean by beauty? It's the same problem that the interlocutors in these dialogues have. Good luck articulating it. Good luck fully explaining and describing it. Plato would say you can't. Which then makes it difficult for me to demonstrate to you that I actually have had the epiphany of truth, beauty, and goodness. This is not Dr. Schrappe claiming that he has. This is just a what if. If Plato is right, if Dr. Schrappe has had the epiphany, how the heck would he demonstrate it to us? Because anything he's going to say about it is going to sound very much like particular subjective opinion, which could cast doubt on the existence of all of this stuff. If when I get to the top, I sound like the folks at the bottom, again, to the people in Athens, what Socrates was doing seemed very much like what all the teachers of oratory were doing. You didn't know the difference, you didn't recognize the difference unless you were engaged in it, unless you were on the inside, right? Plato is saying, look, you're not going to recognize the folks who've had the epiphany from the folks who are just talking like they have, unless you yourself are on this path and on this journey somewhere. And most folks aren't. So most folks aren't going to get it, which is why his ideal political state is not democracy, because most folks get it wrong, says Plato. Democracy is meh. Democracy's okay, not great, not awful. You know what would be great? You know the best political system? Benevolent dictatorship. And this dictator would be a born philosopher who's had this epiphany experience. And how do you have the epiphany experience? Through the Socratic method of question and thinking. Being asked particular questions to elicit, oh man, whoa, I got it now. That it thing that you can't articulate. The form. Because as he says elsewhere, to know the good, for your soul to understand and perceive the good is to necessarily then do the good. So you'd have to be a benevolent dictator if you've had the epiphany experience. You're necessarily going to do what's best for everyone because you have access to the form of goodness in a way that others don't. Furthermore, even though Plato is an elitist and only a few folks have this epiphany thing, he does not say that the born philosopher therefore is better than. They're just better equipped for certain things. You know what you don't want a born philosopher doing? Taking care of your kids. Because they're not good at caretaking. You don't want the philosopher out there on the front lines of battle. It's not what they're good at. You don't want the born philosopher selling you stuff. They're not good at it. You don't want the born philosopher making stuff. No. The born philosopher should be thinking and ruling accordingly. That's it. Everyone's equipped differently. Forms of truth, beauty, goodness. I think it's interesting there are 4 sections here, and Schrappe at least thinks there's interesting parallels between Hinduism and Platonism and what Plato's talking about. If you want more on that, email me, we can converse or whatever. So that kind of leads us a little far afield for here. And Hinduism, of course, also has epiphanies and enlightenment experiences and peeling away certain sheaths, primarily of the body, which is where the senses would be. Then you peel away the mind to get to the inner Brahma, the God within, so on and so forth, which is very soul talk. That's the point of some types of yoga, is to relax, to peel away the sheaths. But anyway, I've already talked too much about it. Okay, this is not a class on Hinduism. I think it's very interesting. Then you also have the caste system. There's 4 castes, which may parallel. Anyway. Stop talking about Hinduism. It maps very nicely onto at least the traditional college experience, the way that it's structured, the way it's supposed to go. And by the way, Plato opened the first academy, which is the closest thing that we have to the original university idea. Of course, the modern university founded more on the religious model, where the truth that you were trying to get to was God. They're based like monasteries and so forth. But anyway, these academies, this Platonic academy, and using modern colloquialisms and parlance and words to describe that. As a freshman, again, let's think traditional 4-year institution. As a freshman, you come in probably thinking you know a whole heck of a lot of stuff, only to realize you don't know that much. That a whole heck of a lot of what you were taught in K through 12 education is actually just downright false. It's just not correct. I mean, you can look at things like history and the founding fathers and all of that nonsense for more on that story. Oh, they were upholding ideals. Baloney. They didn't like the fact that their tea was being taxed. Taxation without representation. They didn't care about the representation part. They cared about the taxation part. But anyway, sorry, that was Dr. Schrappe. Okay, anyway. So you come in as a freshman thinking you know stuff, and you have to take all these intro classes that you don't care about, basically to make you realize you don't know as much as you thought you knew. It's meant to intellectually break you down. Now, there should also be some encouragement there as well, but the intro classes are like, look, here's an introduction to a discipline that you know nothing about. And if you thought you knew something, you're probably wrong. Because only once you've been broken down, only once something has been broken can it be rebuilt. Look at things like the military. They break you physically and psychologically so that they can then rebuild you, so that they can mold you in their image. That's the point. That's what, it's not boot camp, what's the thing called? Basic training. That's what it's for, is to break you. The point of freshman year of college, yes, you build bonds of friendship and so on and so forth and meet new people and get exposed to new ideas, but these new ideas should break down your previously held ideas. Because by breaking them down, now you're ready to learn something else. So from freshman year, you then go to sophomore year. Sophomore literally means wise fool. This is like Socrates. I know that I know nothing. Since I know nothing, now I'm ready to learn. Now I'm ready to be taught because I've been broken. Now I'm ready to be rebuilt. My pride is now gone. My self-assurance and all of that is now gone. Now I'm ready. Sophia, wisdom or knowledge. More, same where we get the word moron. Dumb. Now you're ready to learn. Sadly, many people don't come back for their sophomore year. Many people can't take the breaking that it takes for the rebuilding. Return rates in colleges, and I haven't looked at this recently, I should check my statistics on this, but at least as of a few years ago, people, generally speaking, had a better chance of returning to prison than they do returning to college for their sophomore year. Now again, there's a whole lot of societal stuff wrapped up in that. For more on that, take my intro to ethics class. We talk about forms of punishment and so on and so forth. But the point is, a lot of folks don't come back. Basic training breaks some folks and they don't come back for the rebuild. They quit. That's a thing. But now that you've got these intro classes out of the way as a freshman and a sophomore, and you start moving into your major coursework as a junior or a senior, now you're really learning some stuff. Now you're really diving in and getting behind the scenes and understanding not just that it works, but how it works and why it works. So again, PhD, Doctorate of Philosophy, the highest degree attainable in most disciplines, is like the form stuff. You're getting to the forms of, you're getting to the abstract ideas, the abstract concepts of mathematics, of biology, of theater, of whatever it is. You're learning the whys, not just the hows. Here's the hows. And again, everyone's capable of learning those, says Plato. Only a few folks are even capable of this level up here. And it's interesting that this somewhat corresponds, Schrappe at least thinks, to the words that we use and the weight that we give to those words. So in English at least, it seems that if I say something like, well, I feel like the crew were going to win, for instance. I feel that's kind of weak. You feel that, that's nice, that's very particular, it's very subjective. That feeling could change based upon other things, right? Based upon which side of the bed you wake up on, if we're talking about attunement with Heidegger, and mood. You know, I feel like this. Kind of a weak claim. I'm not putting a lot of validity to those claims if you're the recipient, if you're the hearer of what I'm saying. A little bit stronger, but still not great. I believe. Now there's the crew chant, I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Okay. Belief is nice. It's a component of knowledge, but it ain't knowledge yet. Knowledge is justified. It's true in its belief, not just belief. But I believe does have a bit more conviction, a bit more oomph behind it than I feel. I feel like I believe that. Even stronger than that, or even more convincing to the hearer than that is, I think that such and such. Because now you've probably got some reasons to back it up. We talked before about reasons, and backing something up is about objective. I can back up why I think the work of art is a good work of art. I can't back up why I feel like I like it. It's a me thing. I think the crew will win. Here are the reasons why. Right, strong midfield play or whatever. Even stronger than I think. And it seems, and I'll talk more about this next week when we talk about post-truth, people seem more and more reticent to use these types of words. I know that something. I know that every triangle has 3 sides and 3 angles that up to 180. I know that every circle has 360 degrees. I know that I love my wife and children. I may not be able to articulate that. I may not be able to explain that to you. But I know it to be true. What part of it, me, knows it? Not my mind. That's why I can't explain it. Words are about the intellect. Explaining is about the intellect. The justification's about the intellect. Here we're talking about the soul understanding and perceiving. Right? We talk about, soul mates and so on and so forth. 2 souls becoming one and all this mystical, romantic stuff. Poetic stuff. Doesn't mean it's not true. Souls understand and perceive. And Plato says the rest of us, our souls can understand and perceive when other souls understand and perceive. They radiate with intelligence. And yet we would still get it wrong. Socrates should have been radiating with intelligence, and people still got it wrong. So while the best of all political models, Plato says, is the benevolent dictator, truth, beauty, goodness, the worst is malevolent dictator. We've seen plenty of those throughout history, and we know how awful that is. someone who's in it for themselves or for a certain segment of people or something along those lines, they haven't had the epiphany of goodness or of truth or of beauty. They just have power. So when we talk about power structures, we talk about Foucault and so on and so forth. I'll talk more about power structures when we get the allegory of the cave. And the malevolent dictator is so awful that we settle for democracy, because most of us would get duped and fooled by any dictator. All dictators would claim to be benevolent. The opportunity to get it so wrong is so awful, we cannot and should not take the chance, so we should settle for democracy, says Plato. But ideally, benevolent dictator. And imagine how much would get done if we had dictatorships. I mean, they are nothing if not efficient. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of bureaucracy in Stalin-era Soviet Union. If Stalin wanted to do something, Stalin did it and it got done. This isn't Schrappe telling you Stalin did great things. Okay? Castro, Pol Pot, look around the world. Any number of examples here. Dictators, when there's a ruler of one, gets a lot done. Democracy takes time. You have to convince others and so on and so forth. Not so with dictatorships. So that's the divided line. So if the divided line didn't make complete sense when you were reading it, maybe it's because you're a born philosopher. What? More on that in the next video.